Welcome back, listeners, to Cosmic Confluence, where we explore the intersection of wisdom, science, and the human experience. In today's episode, we are peeling back the layers of meditation, what it is, what it isn't, and why it might not be what you think. And to help me answer all these questions and for the conversation, joining us is a guest with a truly extraordinary story. Now, listeners, Bob Martin's journey spans from high powered mob lawyer during Miami's cocaine cowboy era to mindfulness mentor, meditation teacher, and professor of wellness at the Elon University. And Bob has helped hundreds of people redesign their thinking for the life they dream of, blending Taoist wisdom and brain science, psychology, and humor. So his transformation is really, really inspiring for all of us. And today, he's here to demystify meditation for all of us. So, Bob, with that, welcome to the show. And as always, it's an absolute pleasure having you with us.
Oh, thank you so much for the invitation.
Okay, Bob, let's start with the basics. Meditation is often seen as either mystical or overly complex. So how do you define it in simple terms?
Yeah. Well, it is neither mystical nor complex. Um, Matter of fact, most of us do it all the time. Most of us do what we do in meditation every single day of our lives. The only difference is when we do it in meditation, we do it intentionally and we do it with awareness. In other words, we watch ourselves doing it, but we still do it. I'll give you a couple of examples.
Yeah.
Um, I am sure that you've been in a conversation with someone, and even as you are in the conversation, you are thinking with another part of your mind, hmm, this isn't going so well. Or, I said that pretty well. Or, that didn't really describe what I meant to say. But you have these thoughts that are kind of commenting on what you're actually doing in your life. Am I right?
Yeah, 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 I agree.
That's meditation. That is meditation. That's what we do in meditation. We watch our thoughts. The only difference is that when we do it in our everyday life, it doesn't really do us any good because it's just yada yada more blah blah blah. But when we do it intentionally, with a little bit of guidance and with a little bit of skill and with a little bit of a different perspective, all of those thoughts can be very helpful in understanding what thoughts we have that are helpful and what thoughts we have that maybe aren't really our thoughts. Maybe they're the product of our conditioning. Maybe they're the products of the society around us who told us that boys should be this way and girls should be that way and we should act this way. Maybe that's not, what's the best for us. And so that's one of the ways that meditation is not complicated.
Hmm. But I think it gives an amazing perspective to meditation. And many people say that, Bob, that meditation helps expand the mind and unlock new perspectives, possibilities. So, how does this process actually work?
Mhm. It's a good question. And I have to say that there are two questions inside of that question. One is expanding, and the other is finding some peace and tranquility. Those are two concepts that people have about meditation, and both of them are correct, but they they come from different places. So let me, if I may,
Yep.
um, when we go to a gym,
Mm-hmm.
we want to build up our muscles and build up our physical self. And lots of us want to have our beach bodies for the summer, you know? We want to have a nice body when we put our bathing suit on. But generally, we don't start going to the gym the day we put our bathing suit on. Right? So so you start going to the gym, a couple of months before you're gonna get in your bathing suit because you need to build up those muscles. And also, when you go to the gym, you might have, all these ideas about what muscles you're going to work, and you work really hard, but you don't seem to be making any progress. And then somebody comes along and says to you, "Oh, I see that you're doing a bicep curl, that you want to build up your biceps. But what you're doing by moving your arm the way you're moving it, you're actually working your shoulder, not your biceps. Now, if you keep your elbow pinned to your hip
Oh,
and don't move the upper arm and you only move your lower arm, then you will build up your bicep." So that little bit of coaching, that little bit of perspective, that little bit of change of position makes a big difference in the muscle that you build. So the brain works the same way. You think that somehow the brain is, static and that, you get born with it and that's the brain you got, but it's not. There's something called neuroplasticity,
yep.
and and you actually build up muscle in the brain. It's not really muscle, they're called neural pathways, but it's it works just like muscle. The more you use it, the easier it is to use. And when you build up a neural pathway, the difference in how it feels to you is like if it's not built up, it feels like, oh, I don't like to do math, or it's hard for me to think about that, or I don't like to do crossword puzzles. But if you do crossword puzzles a lot, your neural pathways, your brain actually changes. The physical brain changes and the muscle builds up. And then it feels like, oh, I like to do crossword puzzles, or I like math, or I can do math. And so in meditation, we actually use it to go to the gym of our mind to build up the muscles that we want to have that support the kind of person we want to be. So if I want to be a more generous person, I build up my generosity neural pathways. And I do that by there are meditations, to build up generosity. There's something called the loving kindness meditation to build up your sense of awe and your sense of care for all of creation, your sense of belonging, your sense of connection. So there are meditations and specific exercises that you do that build up these neural pathways that, for example, for me,
Mm-hmm.
um, I cry a lot.
What? Okay.
I cry a lot because I feel connected and I feel full of awe and full of love. I feel that a lot in my life because I've built up those neural pathways. I'll tell you a little story. I just took a flight from Costa Rica back here to America, and I had to go to the bathroom. So I got up from my seat and I'm walking to the back of the plane. And I see all these people sitting six across, all of them doing whatever they're doing. Some of them sleeping, some of them playing on their computers, some of them watching a movie, some of them adjusting their children. But they're doing all these different things and they're all these different people. And all of a sudden, I just felt filled with the sense that I was on this vehicle traveling through life with 240 other souls, each of them with their own story. I just felt connected to all of them. And I understood why in movies, when a plane is going down, the captain often says, I had 240 souls aboard. Because for me at that moment, they were souls. So you don't have those experiences. Those things don't happen to you unless you take a little time to intentionally build up your compassion muscles.
Hmm, that's beautiful. That's really beautiful, Bob. And so if I would like to share my takeaways, first of
Mm.
all, um, conditioning or maybe rewiring your brain muscles. It's something like, when you start building your muscles, initially it pains a
Yes.
lot of pain you have to go through, you have to bear through that pain.
Yeah.
But then gradually, when you are conditioning your muscles, then it becomes a lot easier for you. So, similar thing we can definitely say for our brain muscles as well. When we start to practice something very difficult every day with consistency, then slowly and gradually our brain starts to adapt, because I think meditation is definitely a very effective way to have more of reception. And when you have more of reception, somehow, as you mentioned about the specific type of meditation, it opens up that compassion point or pathway in your brain. And also I really appreciate, you saying that you cry a lot, because that's not something we hear from men every day. So really, really, I mean, that's such a beautiful example, beautiful moment or anecdote you shared.
Well, what you talk about is something that I use the words tolerance for discomfort. If people don't like to be uncomfortable with, they don't like discomfort. And unfortunately, if you don't have any tolerance for discomfort, you're going to live in a very, very narrow world. You're not going to risk anything. You're not going to go try anything new. You're not going to do anything that might be the slightest bit uncomfortable. I just want to stay in my cozy little, womb of a room and, talk to the people I know and not talk about anything controversial and not expand my mind and just stay there because anything that I'm gonna do new, the creation of a new neural pathway is uncomfortable. It is, yeah.
So
So,
flop, like
yeah,
flat.
just like the muscles you mentioned. Yeah, so one of the things that meditation does is it builds up your tolerance for discomfort. And after a while, the discomfort becomes, "Oh, okay, big deal. No big deal." Yeah, okay, I'll do that. So that was one answer to the question. The other answer that I wanted to respond to was this idea of, uh, kind of the cosmic nature of the peace and stability and, that aspect that people have of meditation. And that actually is something that happens, but in a different way. Um, and it's, I get to teach on campus. I also have my private practice where I teach individuals, but I also teach on the college campus. And every semester, I get 15 brand new students who know very little about meditation, and I explain things to them, and it takes about 2 weeks of practicing for them, and then all of a sudden they start saying to me, "Oh, now I understand what you're trying to tell me," because it's hard to explain it without the experience of it. But let me try. So I like to use the metaphor of a river because we all sense that there is a river of consciousness that flows through our mind. And on this river of consciousness, there are thoughts. So let's call these thoughts logs and leaves and stuff floating down the river. So most of the time in our life, the way we live our life, it's like we're riding on a log in the river. And if the river is nice and calm, then life is going well and everything's easy.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes there's white water,
Yeah.
and sometimes there's a waterfall,
Yeah.
and sometimes there's a flood, and sometimes there's a storm, and sometimes there's a hurricane, and sometimes there's a light, gentle rain. But there are all these different times that when we're on the log, it means that we're living in a roller coaster and we have very little say. There's nothing we can do about it. We're on the log, we're in the river. However the river goes, that's how we go. And that's what life looks like when you're living in your thoughts, when you are your thoughts. What we do in meditation, it's a very simple little practice. Everybody thinks all we do in meditation is we say, form an intention to put your attention on something and see what happens. That's it. That's all it is. And and what happens is that immediately your mind goes crazy. Starts thinking about what happened yesterday and what I got to do tomorrow and what I should have said and did I leave the stove on and all that kind of stuff. And everybody thinks that the purpose of meditation is to keep your attention on the candle. But that's not where the meditation works. And that's not where the healing occurs. What happens is your mind wanders off, and at some point, because you said, I want to pay attention to the candle, your mind kind of goes, whispers to you, psst, hey, psst, psst, hey, you're not paying attention to the candle.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, you wake up. Oh, I said I was going to pay attention to the candle. And now I'm not. And then there's this flood of judgments. Oh, I should have been doing it, or I'm doing it wrong, or I didn't have any focus, or I lost my concentration. And finally, all of the judgments quiet down. And then you go back and you begin again. And then your mind wanders off again. And psst, psst, hey, you're not paying attention to the candle. And you wake up and you come back and you begin again. And your mind wanders. Psst, you're not paying. You wake up, you come back, and you begin again. That's all it is. That's all it is. But what you're learning here is you're learning A, what it feels like to be lost in the fog of rumination and projection that we normally live in. You're learning what it feels like to wake up. You're learning what it feels like to attend to your thoughts. You're learning all of the crazy judgments that come up into your head. But most importantly, when you go back and you begin again, what you're saying to yourself is, it's okay. I'm okay. I can begin again. And that's where the tolerance for discomfort builds up. And so, in this tiny little experiment, you begin to become aware of so many different facets of the workings of your mind um, that you can progress into creating an entire new life from that simple little exercise.
It's it's like, you know, often when we are thinking about something, we often wander off to think about the future or our past, and we become judgmental. What's going to happen?
Hmm.
How, how am I going to face the situation? Maybe I won't be able to do that, or maybe some kind of mistake or huge mistake we did in the past, and it completely changed the course of our lives, and we start to become once again judgmental,
Mhm.
with our self critics, with harsh criticism. But then I think the candle represents the present. Okay, let me just rewind everything and just focus on the present and be aware of the present moment and work on it.
Yes.
So,
I just had a student
mhm.
who enrolled in the class but was not practicing. And every day, and when my students practice, they write a little log and it comes to me every day. So I get to see every day,
Okay.
if they're practicing and what they're doing. And I asked her, I said, "When you personally decided to take the course because it's not required. And I'm sure that that, when you go to the gym, you can't just look at the machines. You got to get on them and work them.
Yeah.
So what's going on?" Well, it's a long story, but eventually she had come to the conclusion that she didn't deserve to be happy.
Mm. Okay.
And I was asking her questions. Well, what exactly are the words, not her thoughts? Don't describe the thoughts to me. Tell me what the exact words are that go through your brain, and tell me where you're feeling it in your body. And she resisted those requests because they're so strange. But eventually she started, thinking about them, and she eventually identified a place in her body about 3 inches below her left collarbone where she felt the pain. And she identified, a number of words. And then I said, "Do you notice that you're not crying anymore?" And she said, "Oh." I said, "That's because when you think about what body sensations you're feeling, you're in the present moment. You're not in the past thinking about whatever happened that caused you to feel like you don't deserve to be happy. And you're not catastrophizing into the future about how your life is going to go. You're here in the present looking for a physical sensation in your body. And now you're realizing that there is nothing happening right now that you need to cry about." And that changed her whole approach towards the course. And by the end of the course, she wrote a beautiful reflection about how that was going to change her whole life. And so that's the power of meditation.
Wow. Wow. That's really a heartfelt story. And as we mentioned about being in the present, I think going with the flow is such an interesting concept. Of course, it has so many connotations to it. It's kind of, some people think it's a kind of a laid back attitude. But talking about this, you blend Taoism, psychology, and brain science into your teachings. So, can you share one concept from Taoism that could help people in their meditation practice?
What Taoism teaches is that going with the flow is how you master life, but it's not as simple as that. You first have to understand the flow, and then you have to learn how to align yourself with it so that you can be as effective as possible. I studied under a 72nd generation Taoist master from the Shaolin Temple for 6 years. And we asked him once, "Master Ni, why do they call you master?" And he says, "Well, because I've mastered life." And we asked him, "Well, what does it mean to master life?" And he said, "When you can interfere with the natural flow of things the least and have the most impact, you have begun to master life." And so, um, Taoism is about timing, and it's about looking around and being awake and aware to what's happening around you. And it's understanding what's going on inside yourself and the forces that are acting there and around the others. And there are, it sounds complicated, but there are ways to learn. There are practices. There are just ways that you can learn this. But for example, if you want somebody to read your manuscript, and you're outside, you wouldn't want to give it to them at dusk because there's just not enough light. If you want somebody to read something, give it to them when there's enough light. If you want to tell somebody something and they're not of a mind to listen because they're thinking about what they want to do this weekend, then back away. Don't try to force it down their throats. Wait, be patient. And then when they turn to you and say, hey, what was it that you wanted to tell me? At that point, be prepared to give it to them in a better and more polished way. These are the tips and tricks of going with the flow. You don't act the same on a calm river as you act on a white water river. And so knowing when to wait, when to move forward, when to hold off, when to punch through, when to be aggressive, when to be progressive, when to retreat, when to advance. These are all the teachings of Taoism. And so, I'm not going to try to turn my students into Taoists, but I
Mhm.
do try to teach them that patience sometimes is important because it is a reflection of understanding timing. A friend of mine put it this way: if you want the apple and it's not ripe, and you decide that you want the apple anyway, you're going to struggle to get it off the tree. You're going to twist, you're going to pull, you're going to yank. You're going to have to finally twist it off, and it's going to be sour. And if you wait too long, it's going to drop and rot. But if you pick it off just right, it comes off easy and it's sweet. So Taoism is becoming sensitized to the timing and the flow of life and then working with it and not against it. And that's where meditation comes in, because meditation gives you the awareness. And I guess there's another important piece to it. And if you can grab a hold of this idea that everything that you do in life is an experiment. I, I have an artist friend, and he says every time I put my brush to the canvas, every stroke is an experiment. Should I put this much pressure? Should I not put that much pressure? Should I go this angle? Should it be that angle? Should I have mixed the paint differently? There's 100 little questions, and each one is an experiment, and each one gives you feedback, and each one tells you more. So you're not going to be a master of life when you're 12 years old or 14 or 16. But the more aware you are and the more open you are and the more, I guess, if you don't take yourself so seriously and understand that everything's an experiment and you got to mess up an awful lot. I love it about Thomas Edison, who invented the light bulb, said, I did not fail 1,240 times. What I did do was I discovered how to not make a light bulb 2,490 times.
Oh, brilliant, brilliant. I think makes a lot of sense. And I think this is much more um, uh, true and very much needed in today's fast paced, high stress work environments. When you are expected by others as well as yourself to churn out outputs like, in a flash. But anyway, brilliant, Bob. Thank you. Thank you so much for giving us this perspective and helping us actually understand meditation. And also, before we wrap up, one final question. You have such an unconventional life path from high, stress work, mob lawyer during the Miami's cocaine cowboy era. I think it
Mhm.
can be both dangerous and stressful. And now to the path of meditation and mindfulness. So, if there's one lesson from your journey that you hope listeners can take away, especially our younger generation, the future, what would it be?
That question is asked, and I often have different answers. The answer that comes up for me right now is this. Um, People look at me at 75 and people come to me and they ask me for advice and for my wisdom a lot. And I have a very happy life and I look back on it with no regrets. But that doesn't mean that I don't get stressed, I don't get angry, I don't get overwhelmed, I don't snap at my wife. Um, I, I- all of those things still exist inside of me with all of the work and study under Master Nee and years of meditation. All of that is still there. But what makes it worthwhile and makes it okay is that I balance it off by intentionally curating my environment so that I surround myself with beauty and awe. So don't ever think that you're gonna be some kind of perfect la la tree hugging kumbaya person that, life's just gonna be merrily, 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 life is but a dream. I don't think it will, but you can balance your life, but it takes a little intention. Surround yourself with beauty. Go into some place where there's tinted glass. Watch the sun come through it. Watch the sunrise. Enjoy a sunset. Look at your dog. Enjoy and play with your pets. Do these things because it's not about a perfect life. It's about a balanced life.
Beautiful, beautiful. I think such a beautiful message for all of our listeners, especially the current generation. And Bob, if our listeners would want to connect with you, how they can do that.
Well, a lot of people ask me questions about meditation, and so I decided I'd just write down all the answers in a little book. And it's a free, absolutely no obligation ebook, and you can download it at my website, which is awiseandhappylife.com. Awiseandhappylife.com.
Great. We'll have the details mentioned in the show notes. And Bob, this has been such a fascinating conversation. Such a fascinating conversation with so many beautiful examples and situations which help us understand simple yet the different layers of meditation. So, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
And to all of our listeners, I thank all of you for being a part of Cosmic Confluence. If you have found this conversation useful, if you think you have learned something which you can apply in your day to day lives to better yourself, be sure to subscribe to us and leave us a review. And remember that meditation isn't about escaping life, it's more about engaging with it fully. It's having a balanced life, as said by Bob. So until next time, stay curious and stay connected. Thank you.